shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries, and I want to welcome you to Tuesday's edition of End of the Age. Now, before we get started talking about my subject today about the United Nations and world government and different things, I want to announce a prophecy Bible study that's held here every Thursday night, and it starts at 7 o'clock. So for all of y'all that are in this area, around our Endtime headquarters, around the Dallas area, it's held at the Endtime Television headquarters at 2701 East George Bush Highway in Plano, Texas. I facilitate, and have been for years, an Endtime prophecy Bible study. So if you want to join me, it starts next Thursday, the 18th. Of course, most of you know that on Tuesday, the 16th, Irvin Baxter will be holding a prophecy conference at our church in Garland. The following Thursday after that, starting on the 18th, I will be facilitating an Endtime prophecy Bible study in our Endtime television facility here. And so if you want to come and join me, it starts at 7 o'clock. You would come in the east entrance. Everybody's welcome. I would ask you to please RSVP to drobbins@endtime.com. That's DROBBINS at endtime.com. To join me. We always have a huge crowd, and it's a lot of fun, and there's always new information to this stuff. Stuff's happening every day, and so we try to keep you updated on that because you need to understand it's so critical, especially over the next few years, that you understand the prophecies of the Bible to help prepare you and your family, both physically and spiritually, for the times just ahead and for eternity. So if you'd like to join me, we'll have a great time, and it starts next Thursday, the 18th, here at the Endtime Television Studios. So on today's program, we're going to be discussing the world government prophesied in the Bible. It's found in Revelation 13, verses 1 through 8, and it describes the world government that will be established just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. So think of it like this, because this is very, very critical. Besides the sixth trumpet war, which will destroy 1/3 of the world's population, the world government will be the most intrusive prophecy to each and every one of us. Every person on earth, even Christians, need to be concerned about this. In Revelation 13:7, it says, "And it was given unto him, the Antichrist, to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And power was given unto him over all kindreds, tongues, and nations." So this will affect every person under the sound of my voice, regardless of how much money you have, your educational background, your pedigree. None of that stuff matters. This world governing body is going to seek to usurp authority over each and every one of us. So you need to know what it is and know how to prepare for it. So let's first talk about the world government. And I'll give you a brief overview of it. Since 1945, the United Nations was established to be this world governing body. Of course, the original charter that was signed by Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy, he wrote the charter to be the Constitution for the United Nations, and he wrote it to be a communistic global governing body. The United Nations that you know about in New York, that's supposed to be this great humanitarian organization, was established from its inception to be a global governing body. And now it's coming into the culmination of that. There was the beginning where they tried a lot of different things, and they didn't really have teeth, but now they're starting to, the tentacles of this huge organization is starting to get into all of the nations of the world, even down to the point into our local cities, our local governments and different things. It's not just this United Nations global governing organization somewhere else that's, controlling the nations across the ocean. Now it's coming into the United States as well, and we're going to talk about that in great detail on today's program. So you understand that in September of last year, President Obama, as well as every other nation on earth, signed on to implement the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the United Nations effort to govern the planet. Of the Sustainable Development Goals, goal number 16 is to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development and to provide access to justice for all, to build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. So they each have different targets under every goal. Target number 16.8, this is very critical, is to broaden and strengthen the participation of developing countries in the institutions of global governance. Whenever you hear the term global governance, think world government. It's the same exact same thing. There's no difference. So you say, well, man, Dave, the Sustainable Development Goals, those were all signed back in September. And, I was kind of hoping that if I didn't pay attention to it, that it might just go away. Well, I can promise you that these absolutely are not going away. They've actually been instituted for years. And now that with the signing of the Sustainable Development Goals in September, they're actually going much farther and being much more intrusive in each of our lives. I'm talking about every person under the sound of my voice in every aspect of your life. So let's talk about it today. The United Nations recently published a plan of implementation for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And it's very critical that we understand this, moving on, the Sustainable Development Goals. How will they implement this around the world? But before I actually get into the actual document, let's define the Sustainable Agenda, or the United Nations effort to establish a world government. The United Nations Sustainable Development Knowledge Platform, which is on the United Nations website, they have a section on goal setting as a tool of global governance. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. And it states that global goals, or the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which President Obama signed the United States onto, are one of a battery of tools that can be deployed in global governance. In the absence of hard, enforceable instruments, such as national laws that can be enforced, the UN and other institutions use a range of tools and mechanisms to influence decision-making and the behavior of states, businesses, non-governmental organizations, and other actors that shape development and other global parties. So they're already saying, hey, we use a myriad of different ways to enforce our global governing agenda on the nations of the world. They're already doing it. Many of you will recognize Agenda 21. It is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations system, governments, and major groups in every area in which human impacts on the environment. Now, that's everywhere. That's every aspect of every human being, every aspect of their lives. To begin with, let's discuss what is this sustainability agenda. Well, it's the ultimate impact of the sustainability agenda. When you think of the term sustainability agenda, think of world government. Same thing. And it's a massive transformation of the social, political, technological, cultural, and behavioral processes which impact how mankind produces and consumes. In other words, sustainability affects every aspect of life on Earth, period. Green initiatives attempt to modify human behavior to reward us for how we eat, work, travel, and play more sustainably, or more in line with the edicts that are handed down from the United Nations to the United States even, folks. Sustainable development is simply a catchphrase used by activists and government agencies involved in the implementation of Agenda 21, which according to the UN's own website is a comprehensive plan of action to be taken globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations, systems, governments, and major groups, in every area which impacts the humans on the environment. The ultimate goal of Agenda 21, or sustainable development, is the control by the United Nations and a future one world government of all human settlements, determining where one can live and what land should be used for, even your private land. Always remember this: Agenda 21, sustainable development, and global governance are all the exact same thing. You read about them all the time in your news. It's a world government. The United Nations published a plan of implementation for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. So they're not going to let them rest. They're not going to go away. All of the nations of the world signed on to this back in September. And they're planning on implementing them. They have been implementing them for years, but now it's so much more than that. It's so much more intrusive. Listen to the plan that they have. It's called Getting Started with Sustainable Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. Now, this is just one of the programs that they have, and this is a global initiative of the United Nations. And it states, and I quote, "In September 2015, heads of state and governments agreed to set the world on a path towards sustainable development," or, remember, world government, through the adoption of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. This agenda includes 17 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, which set out quantitative objectives across the social, economical, now they're planning on governing our economics, and environmental dimensions of sustainable development, all to be achieved by 2030, just 14 short years away. The goals provide a framework for shared action for people, planet, and prosperity to be implemented by all countries and all stakeholders acting in collaborative partnerships. That's every person on earth, folks. As articulated in the 2030 Agenda, never before have world leaders pledged common action and endeavor across such a broad and universal policy agenda. Every nation on earth signed this, folks. 169 targets accompany the 17 goals and set out quantitative and qualitative objectives for the next 15 years. These targets are global in nature and universally applicable, taking into account different national realities, capacities, and levels of development, and respecting national policies and priorities. A set of indicators, and this is what we're going to talk about mainly today, very detailed. A set of indicators and a monitoring framework will also accompany the goals. Now, President Obama stepped to the platform when he gave his speech and said, "Hey, I've signed us onto these goals, and the Sustainable Development Goals, world governments, and everybody's happy, and they go away," and it kind of dies to most people. If you don't follow it, you think, well, hey, that's kind of went away. They signed us onto that, so what? But they didn't understand that there's going to be very, very inclusive monitoring systems set up to make sure that the United Nations, this world government, achieves and implements these goals. So there are illustrative indicators for a quick assessment of a country or a region starting position with regards to sustainable development. So some of the things that they'll do when they go into a country, there's indicators they look at, things they want to track and monitor to know where do we need to look at, how do we need to implement global governance to get this country to comply with our edicts of this world governing body. So I'm just going to give you a few, and you can see, look at how intrusive this is by the United Nations to try to implement these sustainable development goals, which is a world governing body. They're going to try to govern each of these. And some of the indicators they look at is the life expectancy at birth in that country, the proportion of seats held by women in national parliaments. So it's all about equality at that point. You hear equality all the time in the news now. alternative and nuclear energy, the average annual per capita GDP over the last 5 years in that country, the CO2 emissions per capita, so they're getting into the climate change area, which is an absolute complete hoax. But the United Nations is riding that horse to the end because they're into wealth redistribution. It's all socialism. It's a socialistic platform. Climate change redistributes wealth from industrialized nations to underdeveloped nations. And so they're all about that because the United Nations is set up on a socialistic platform. They also look at the annual change in forest area because they're going to monitor and manage and globally govern what we do with our forests and how the earth is taken care of, because you see, the United Nations believes that they know better than all the humans and citizens of the earth how to globally govern the earth. So that's their goal here, is we don't know how to govern ourselves, so the almighty United Nations needs to globally govern us. That's their goal here. It's all about control, control, control. They also look at homicides per 100,000 of the population and the water stress score because they want to manage the water of the planet. They know that people on the planet without water, you die. So they want to manage this. Even though God supplies us with our water, they think they know better than anybody else how to manage it. So these are some of the indicators, and these are just a few. But focus in on how intrusive and detailed the United Nations wants this global governance to be. They want to monitor and then govern every single aspect of my life and every single aspect of your life. Every person listening to me today is not exempt. And I'm going to show you how not exempt you are over the course of the program here. So, what we're talking about, the Sustainable Development Goals or this global government, this is the very global government that the Antichrist will rule in the very near future. The Bible prophesies it. There's going to be a world government established. The Antichrist will assume authority of that at a certain period in time. And if I have time before the program is over, I'll kind of go through a short timeline to let you know when that's going to happen. But the Antichrist is going to rule over this world governing body. The Bible is crystal clear on that. And we're not watching the beginning of this, folks. We're watching the culmination. They're already getting teeth. And so we've watched it happen for years, and we know the Bible prophesies it for the very near future. So this is very, very key, because who will be involved in making sure that all of us are monitored? It's very key, because this is where it really hits home to us. They're first going to look at national governments. Say, well, how in the national governments, who's going to be involved? Well, the professional staff within the ministries, representatives from governments and municipalities. This is what they've all got it designed. This is all laid out by the United Nations. Also, civil society organizations. These are the ones, all of these that I'm going to list are the ones who will monitor you in great detail to make sure that you comply. Civil society organizations such as non-governmental organizations, volunteer organizations, indigenous people organizations, faith-based organizations. We are a faith-based organization. Is there going to come a time when we are going to be called upon to monitor people? It says faith-based organizations, social movements, and community-based organizations. And then they're going to get into our businesses. Business leaders, Chamber of Commerce and Industry, cooperatives and unions, economic development corporations, and manufacturers. So they're going to make sure that all of them are lining up to the Sustainable Development Agenda themselves, and then monitoring people around them, other manufacturers and different things, to make sure that they comply. Academic institutions, National Sustainable Development Solutions Networks, universities, technical institutions, research centers, national academies, and schools of urban planning, social sciences, and public policy. So they're going to make sure that these schools are teaching the principles of the sustainable developments and their agenda. They're going to make sure they're not going to let major universities teach something that's contrary to the United Nations agenda. So they're going to make sure that if you go to one of these, to a university or the schools, or you are going to following the principles of the Common Core, they're going to make sure that you get indoctrinated with their global governing agenda, which is the Sustainable Development Goals. Then, of course, development partners. They'll also be used to monitor bilateral, multilateral donors, of course, UN agencies, regional development and central banks, international institutions such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and then also subnational governments. State provincial governments or other forms of regional government are often responsible for urban and local development. You felt it if you own land at all. You felt the heat from that, them telling you what you can do with your land or they're going to take it. And then it also comes right down to the local authorities. This is not just the government or the state, somebody that you could, maybe hide from. It's way past that already. It gets down to your local councils and elected representatives, public utility and service providers. Talk about smart meters and different things. The planning bodies and parastatal agencies. I used to be in construction myself for 20 years, and I had to stand before many of these planning boards. And if you think they can't tell you what you can and cannot do with your property, then you've never tried to do anything yet, because they can tell you whether you build a pond on your property or whether you don't build it, or how close to a property line you can build, or whether you can, what you can do with the water that comes onto your property. I mean, it's in great detail, because they can govern your land better than you can. So it comes right down to our localities. They're very, very intrusive, and they're going to make sure that these local governments are following their internationally governing agenda, and that they monitor. They're going to monitor them to make sure they monitor all of us into compliance. So you say, well, Dave, how will they monitor us? Because this is very key. You can say they're going to monitor us, but how are they going to monitor us? Well, the success of the Sustainable Development Goals agenda hangs on a careful monitoring of our progress. They're not going to, you can't manage what you can't monitor. So, as recognized in the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, in the outcome document, Transforming Our World, the quality, accessible, timely, and reliable disaggregated data will be needed to help with the measurement of progress and to ensure that no one is left behind, or no one is left out from being monitored, is basically what they're saying. A toolkit of data instruments for monitoring the Sustainable Development Goals are, and they give a list. Number one, a census, a systematic recording of information from all members of a given population. You wonder what a census is for? Some of them come from the United Nations. Number two, or will come in the near future, a household survey, a national sample of randomly selected households that provides data on demographic and socioeconomic characteristics. Number three, an agricultural survey, surveys of farms, ranches, and people who operate related enterprises, including data on crop yields, economic variables, and environmental data. Now, folks, I'm not making this stuff up. This stuff has been established for years, how they're going to monitor each and every one of us and make sure that we comply with these Sustainable Development Goals that President Obama signed the United States onto and says we will implement these. He basically sold us out to this world governing body, because this is very intrusive and will control every aspect of your life and my life. Number four, another way that they will monitor is geospatial data, infrastructure, and facility inventories, which is data with locations, specific information, including other data input mentioned above, and spatial visualization, including facility inventories and core geographical data layers. Another one is civil registration and vital statistics. It's a form of administrative data that records vital events in a person's life, including birth, marriage, divorce, adoption, and death. So it's not just what do you do with your property, Are you complying with our climate change agenda? They want to know every single thing about your life, and they're keeping a data record on that, on you as an individual. Why? Because they want to control you. They want to know how to better control you in the future. That's what these Sustainable Development Goals are all about. Control, world government. And there will come a time in the near future when the Antichrist sits at the head of this. A sixth way they will do it is administrative data, information collected primarily for administrative or management purposes, including welfare, taxes, educational record systems, among other things. And then economic statistics. Why do they want economic statistics? Because they're going to try to manage your economics before it's over with, your finances. This would include financial and economic performance measurements, including the labor force, establishment surveys, economic performances, employment, taxation, imports, exports, and other industrial activities. They want to know everything about our economy so they can manage it better, because we don't know how to, according to them. Then they look at environmental data, which is real-time monitoring, ground stations, satellite imagery for a range of environmental variables, including biodiversity, air quality, water resources, and forest and land use change. So, it's very, very key that you understand they're establishing a world government, and they're going to monitor everything you do and make sure, no matter what happens, that this agenda will be pushed forward. And other innovative data applications are discussed further along in the document as part of the SDG planning and implementation process, including designing a set of SDG indicators and conducting a needs assessment for the Sustainable Development Monitoring governments that should start an inclusive dialogue on how to monitorize data and the production using approaches such as, and we'll get into it when we get back from the break. It's very critical. It's even going to go farther than what I've already discussed.
This trip was a special experience for me. My study of the Bible has been enhanced after seeing Israel. The guides and planners for this trip did an excellent job of taking care of us. The hotels and furnished meals were top-notch. This is a trip of a lifetime. Sign up and go. Bert from Arizona. Come with us as we walk in the footsteps of Jesus and learn about the end-time story on our Israel Holy Roman Empire tour. The Bible prophesies that the Antichrist and false prophet will come out of the Holy Roman Empire. We will be touring the capital of the European Union in Brussels, Belgium, where the rebirthed Holy Roman Empire was fulfilled. We will also visit the Charlemagne Cathedral in Aachen, Germany, who was the first emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. We will be touring the Hall of the Caesars in Frankfurt, Germany, and much more. When we get to Israel, we will see the Mount of Olives, the Garden Tomb, the Temple Institute, Bethlehem, the Western Wall, the Sea of Galilee, the Mount of the Beatitudes, and more. Irvin and Judy hope you will come with them and experience the Israel Holy Roman Empire tour to share one of their favorite places on earth with you. Call 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com for more information.
If your radio station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com to continue to listen to today's broadcast.
Well, welcome back, everybody. And I know I'm throwing a lot of information at you concerning the implementation of these Sustainable Development Goals, which is world government, that President Obama signed us onto back in September. And it's very, very critical that you understand how intrusive that they're willing to go to make sure that they govern each and every one of us. And in the last segment, I went through several ways of how they're going to monitor this, but it's actually going to go so much farther than that. They're going to keep an eye on every single one of us, what we're doing with our land, how much we produce and consume as far as energy, food, everything. They're trying to drill down and monitor, to regulate every single aspect of our life. And our current president signed us on to absolutely comply with all of these edicts. Now, one of the things that I might say is that this kind of sheds a little light on how important the election coming up in November is. If you think, oh, I may or may not vote, who knows? No, you need to absolutely be educated and vote. And let me say this at the outset before I take off into this. If in our current magazine we put a chart of where all of the presidential candidates stand on their issues and different things. Some of the things we couldn't even figure out where they stood because they wouldn't tell us. They won't tell anybody where they stand on some of these issues. But if you are ever in a town hall meeting or something with one of these candidates, and if I'm ever in one, I'll ask it and I'll report back to you. But if you're ever in one, I'd like for you to ask this question and then email me so I can get on the radio and talk about it. But if you're ever in one of these town hall meetings and with Trump or Hillary, I don't care who it is, ask them, on day one, is it your plan to pull the United States out of the United Nations? Will you pull us out of this global governing body? Because look at over the last 7+ years ago, look at the past 7+ years. Look at what's happened to our country. President Obama has pretty much almost signed our sovereignty away, especially with what happened in September with these Sustainable Development Goals. And he totally agrees with global government. He is an internationalist. He believes in us coming under the auspices or the authority of a global governing body. He's for that. He's for giving away our sovereignty and coming under their rulership. And so that lets you know, I would ask a presidential candidate, will you pull us out from under the United Nations? Pull us out of there. Cut ties with them. We don't want any part of them. We signed a declaration of independence, not interdependence. And because I'm telling you, over the next several years, it's very critical. A lot of big things are going to happen prophetically. And we need to make sure that we don't elect somebody who's going to take us, who's going to continue on down that path and do much worse. We need to elect somebody who's going to pull us out of that. So that's the question I would ask in these debates. That's the number one question I would ask. Will you pull us out of the United Nations and this global governing body? Cut us off. We can govern ourselves. We came out from under King George because we wanted to govern ourselves. We didn't want to come out from under one dictator to be put under another one. So, man, I could almost preach here. At any way, let me continue on, because this global governance, these Sustainable Development Goals, they get much more intrusive than what I've already talked about. That was kind of the surface, how they're going to monitor everything, but they're going to get to the point where they actually keep an eye directly on you. One of the ways is satellite imagery. The cost of high-resolution image acquisition is falling while the availability of images and capacity for automated processing are increasing. There are many applications for such data across multiple goals, such as predicting harvests, disaster response, Earth observations, and food security situations, monitoring geographic patterns and likely transmission corridors of diseases that have geospatial determinants, measuring population density and the spread of new settlements, and mapping and planning of transportation infrastructure. So you see how important this is. It's so intrusive, they're going to get to where they want to know where populations are moving to. What's the crop yield in Ohio? So they want to monitor and govern all of that. So I'm not just going to tell you what they want to do. I'm going to give you examples of how they're already doing it. The first example is from the World Economic Forum, and it says the most important water stories of 2015. And it says the groundwater supplies became a big global worry. Thanks to several high-profile scientific assessments, the California drought, and growing public attention, unsustainable use of groundwater supplies became an international story. Satellite data showed, now there it is, satellite data, they've already got satellites monitoring stuff, showed that a majority of the world's largest aquifers are declining, and isotope data revealed that a small fraction of the world's groundwater is being used in a renewable way. Coastal regions are battling to keep the oceans from seeping into freshwater aquifers that are used by cities and farms. In California's Central Valley, a farming powerhouse, some land is collapsing and growing. A number of private and municipal wells are going dry as more groundwater is pumped and groundwater levels dropped. How do they know that this is happening? Satellite imagery. They've got the satellites in the sky monitoring stuff already. They went and taken pictures of these different things, and in most cases, it's private property, and they're monitoring stuff already. They get the data back and they say, hey, we can govern this way. And that's what the Sustainable Development Goals is all about. Global government. A second way is that they're going to monitor is unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs. Closer to Earth, unmanned aerial vehicles closer than satellites are capable of collecting a range of useful measurements at low cost with relevance to the complete SDG agenda, the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. So they're telling us straight out, here's what we're trying to do. We're going to use unmanned aerial vehicles to monitor you. An example of this is researchers developing drones to autonomously repair the cities of the future. It goes on to state, perceive and patch. It is a system which will involve the development of drones that keep watch over the city streets, autonomously detecting and repairing potholes in roads, whereas Fire and Forget is looking to develop robots, it's a company, develop robots that can function independently and indefinitely inside live utility pipes, carrying out inspections, repairs, metering, and reporting tasks. The critical part of this project is being proactive rather than reactive, said Dr. Raul Fuentes from the University's School of Civil Engineering. This is crucial to ensuring that we have sustainable and resilient infrastructure. We will target our interventions so that they are invisible to the human eye before they become a real problem. So they're going to make sure, they're going to use drones to monitor our streets to make sure that they are sustainable in the future. Here it is. The SDGs are being played out already, the Sustainable Development Goals. It's already being introduced and they're already being implemented. They're not waiting till year 2030 to do it. They're already doing it, and it's been being done for years. A third way is crowdsourcing, another way that they will be more intrusive in monitoring, and that is global connectivity has created the opportunity for wide-scale participation in data collection and data processing, with applications in road mapping, land cover classification, human rights monitoring, price tracking, species inventories, and disaster response, planning with new applications unfolding regularly. Another way that they're going to monitor, and a lot of you, under the sound of my voice, already have these on your home, smart meters. The increasing use of smart metered systems for energy and water distribution, which transmit usage information over communications networks, and they create novel capabilities to measure and manage service provision. But more than that even, they're wanting to monitor how much you use, so in the future they might be able to scale back what you use if you're not complying with the Sustainable Development Goals and what they're trying to do. You need to live a sustainable lifestyle according to the United Nations or the world governing body. Enel's Tegator system in Italy is one of the largest and most successful examples of this. Another example is the importance of green communications post-COP21. This is from the Holmes Report. It's encouraging solar PV developments and energy storage, continuing efforts to improve insulation in buildings and use LEDs, installing smart meters, and planting and keeping trees to offset emissions. These are all viable options for the near term. Companies will now need to look at ways to reach beyond these near-term ideas to meet the ambitious goals that governments agreed to in the Paris Accord. Now get this, smart meters are already everywhere. Utilities have installed 50 million at homes across where? Across the world? No, 50 million at homes across the United States, reaching 43% of homes overall, according to the Edison Foundation's Institute for Electric Innovation. So you say 50 million in the United States, that's already here. Absolutely. And they've already been installed. They're not going to be installed between here and 2030. They've already been installed, folks. This stuff's already put in place, and they're already monitoring you and I. We have people that work here at Endtime that have smart meters on their homes. They're monitoring them. It's all about future control. Number 5, the fifth one is smartphone and tablet-based data collections. Right here it is, folks. Your smartphone. Your smartphone can track you and do a lot of different things. And as described in the SDSN indicator report, many surveys are now being conducted on digital mobile platforms. This practice reduces the time and cost for data collection, improves accuracy, and simplifies collection of GIS and image data, streamlines integration and other information streams, and opens up the possibility of incorporating microchip-based sensors into survey processes. Let me give you an example. Sustainable Development Goals, how data can drive and change. This is how they can drive change. In key areas likely to be involved in these processes include the use of wearable tech in generating vast amounts of highly personalized data, and that of mobile phones as a tool for conducting surveys in regions previously unconnected to the electronic world. So it's very key that we understand and look how intrusive the United Nations is being in implementing these Sustainable Development Goals. It gets into every aspect of your life, even to the point of they're putting smart meters on your home, and they're using your cell phone to track you in different things and collect data. It's the future, folks.
Study prophecy wherever you go with Endtime's audio downloads. Listen to 1-hour lessons like Will Islam Rule the World or Seeds of Armageddon for just $4.99. Let your imagination and your understanding of prophecy dive into the end-time novels like China War in the Third Temple and Dark Intentions written by Irvin Baxter. Maybe you feel bombarded by what's going on in the news and you want to just hear some good old-fashioned preaching. We have tons of sermons taught by Irvin that are rich in truth. You can go through our entire Understanding the End Time series while driving to work, cooking dinner, or wherever your busy day takes you. Let our audio library accompany you by going to endtime.com/store and click the audio downloads.
Many people are very concerned about the direction of our country, the United States of America. Some are predicting its demise. But we at End Time Ministries are happy to announce that there is hope for the future of our nation we love so much. The United States and its special role in the future are specifically prophesied in the Bible. In our new DVD, America's God-Given Destiny, Irvin Baxter explains what the Bible says about the future of our nation and the role we are prophesied to fulfill in the end time. We have dedicated this new DVD to helping the Jewish people. As anti-Semitism is rising rapidly around the world, we want to help them get to safety in Israel. Go to endtime.com and under Irvin's Thoughts, click America's God-Given Destiny. or call 1-800-ENDTIME to find out how you can be involved in this exciting project and receive our new DVD. Let's join together and bring revival to our nation by doing what God has called us to do.
Welcome back, everybody. And I know it kind of feels like you're drinking from a fire hose right now, but I wanted to do a program on this today to let you know how intrusive the United Nations is being with these Sustainable Development Goals, and President Obama is fine with it. It's the United Nations' effort to globally govern the world. It's a global governance. It's what it was established to be from its inception. And they're putting these plans into place, and we're at the culmination of it, not at the beginning. And in the very near future, the Antichrist will sit at the helm of this and rule the world. So it's very critical that we understand these prophecies. Now, I want to give you one more example of monitoring. It's from an article. It's called The 5 Priorities for the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and it comes from the International Weekly Journal of Science. And it says that data gathering using smartphones and miniature sensors can capture point source industrial emissions, waste dumping, and unsustainable consumption. So they're going to try to monitor people like you would kids in a schoolyard. Hey, so-and-so did something wrong, they're in trouble. And so they're going to manage waste dumping, they're going to manage who's consuming, all these different things, unsustainable consumption. And then the citizen science provides new opportunities. For example, starting in 2008, Beijing residents, they used Twitter to share air pollution data obtained from home-based monitoring equipment, this pressured the municipality to improve its air quality monitoring. Such actions also serve as a check on reporting bias from governments, companies, and others. So they're going to use data from phones to actually monitor you, and then they're going to set it up so you can monitor the air quality and different things, and then tattle on the government or on a municipality or on somebody next door who's putting off too much emissions. They want you to tattle on somebody using your smartphone. That's where we're headed, folks. They're going to turn everybody in society against everybody else. And they don't care. They could care less about that, because what's the goal? A global government. And this is exactly what the Bible prophesies is going to happen. So one last example of monitoring is data mining. It all comes down to the data. New uses have been discovered for data sources emerging from processes not explicitly designed for such purposes, such as social media. It wasn't designed for that, but they know they can use it for that now. Mobile call data records, commercial transactions, and traffic records. These are proven applications, have been developed in a range of areas, including crisis response, urban planning, and public health management. This guide provides, the guide we've been going through, provides a first and preliminary attempt to explain how countries, regions, cities, and sectors might start the process of operationalizing and achieving, here it is, the Sustainable Development Goals. So have they started to implement the Sustainable Development Goals yet? Absolutely. It's been implemented for years, folks. It's already in our localities. If you go before a city planning board, some of these, the different Sustainable Development Goals and the Millennium Development Goals before that, those things have been implemented not just at the government level, the national level, but at the state level and down to our local governments as well. City planning boards, all these different things. You've seen huge swaths of land turned into these wildlife reserves. A lot of that stuff, if you check all the way back comes back to the United Nations. Think about it. Go do your research. And so, in the time that I have left, I've got about 8 or 9 minutes left today. I want to summarize what I've talked about and then give you a small timeline about when some of this stuff will happen. So, we've been talking about the Bible prophesies a world government that will be established just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. In 1945, the United Nations was established in an effort to globally govern the world. That's what it was established to do. Now, you can hear all kinds of different people say, oh, no, it wasn't, Dave. It was, No, that's what it was established to do, is to govern the world. The Charter for the United Nations was written by a convicted communist spy. And everybody 30 years old and above will understand when I say communism is a bad thing. It's never been successful in any society. Socialism is a bad thing. It's never been successful in any society. And so, but yet the United Nations is socialistic to its core. And so, since 1945, the United Nations has been being established. They've had different meetings. They have a meeting every year. They sign treaties. They're doing all kinds of different things behind the scenes to govern the globe. And there are people in the world called internationalists, globalists, and they believe that the answer to the problems of the world is for the nation states to give up their sovereignty and to yield to this one world governing body. There's people that actually believe that. There are people here in the United States that would love to remove our borders and yield our sovereignty to this one world governing body, the United Nations. President Barack Obama is one of those individuals. He believes in a world government and that nation states should be done away with and everybody yield up their sovereignty to this one world governing body. Now, that's the United Nations. That's what from its inception to today, that's what it was designed to do. And if you go read the Transforming Your World, the 2030 Agenda, it states in there that all of these Sustainable Development Goals, the entire agenda is based on the charter, the United Nations Charter. All of these principles are based on that charter. So it all goes back to the charter that was penned by Alger Hiss, a convicted communist spy. Why? Because it's established to be a world governing body. And the Pope has bought into it. Pope Francis, back in September, he pledged, he gave a speech and said, hey, we're hoping that this 2030 agenda and the Paris climate change conference, that was everything that was signed on to then, we're looking to them to lead us in the future, and we're hoping that for a new agenda to come from them, which it has. But the Pope was for it. He is an advocate of it. President Obama, obviously the leader, Ban Ki-moon, he said that this 2030, this Transforming 2030 agenda, transforming the world, should be, I believe he said it's a constitution for the world now or something like that. No, he said it's our declaration of interdependence is what he said. And so they're not even really trying to hide the fact that they're trying to govern the world. Now, the Bible prophesies that there will be a global government established, a world government established just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ, and the Antichrist will sit at the helm of that. The next event to occur on God's prophetic timeline is probably the sixth trumpet war. On the heels of that sixth trumpet war, there's going to be a peace agreement signed in the Middle East. And once the peace agreement is signed, the world governing body it's going to come to power really quick. It's going to develop teeth. It's going to, rather than be able to just sign treaties and get governments to sign on to things, they're going to get to the point where people are, after this sixth trumpet war, where 1/3 of the world's population is destroyed, the governments of the world are going to say, look, we can't ever have this again. We're willing to yield up our sovereignty to you, the United Nations, this world governing body. They're going to come to power quickly. 3.5 years after that peace agreement is signed, the Bible says that the Antichrist, which will be a world leader at that point, he will probably sit at the helm of the United Nations or the world governing body. He's going to stand, during the first 3.5 years, the Jews are going to rebuild their temple on the Temple Mount. He's going to stand in that rebuilt Jewish temple and proclaim to be God. It's called the Abomination of Desolation. Many of y'all that follow this program understand the Abomination of Desolation and what that's all about. From that point on, the final 3.5 years is when this world governing body will have an absolute grip on the world. They will not sign a treaty or a document to get you to cooperate with them. They are going to hand down edicts and dictate what you do. I'm talking about all the nations of the world. Now, there will be nations. Obviously, you know that Israel and Jordan are prophesied in the Bible not to come under the reign of the Antichrist. And we are hoping, and Irvin Baxter has taught about this lately in the American Bible Prophecy. He's got a lesson out that he's teaching now at his conferences, that the United States will pull out of that and that we will stand with Israel and protect Israel all the way to the end. Revelation chapter 12 states that Israel is carried away on the wings of a great eagle during this time, where she is nourished in her place for time, times, and half a times, which is that final 3.5 year span before the second coming of Jesus Christ. So we're hoping and praying that the United States will pull out of that. That's when this election just ahead of us becomes so critical, because the next president has the opportunity to be in office for 4 to 8 possible years if he gets reelected. So you understand how important this next presidency, this election coming up in November is. And that's why I told you earlier in the program, if I was going to ask a presidential candidate one question, sure, I would want to know about his religious beliefs and things like that, because those are very dear to us. And we want to turn this nation around spiritually. But I would also ask him, sir, ma'am, depending on whoever you're planning on voting for, will you pull us out of the United Nations? I would make that a hinge point. Will I vote for you, or will I vote for you? I want to know if you're going to pull us out of the United Nations, because it was established from its inception to be a global governing body. And do your research on these sustainable development goals. There's 17 of them, and they are designed to be nothing else than to help the United Nations. It's their plan to govern the world, you and I, each and every one of us.
End of the Age is a production of Endtime Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Endtime Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.